Welcome to the Facing Your Fears podcast, where we talk about facing the fears we encounter in education as teachers, students, administrators, and parents while finding our inner confidence to thrive. I'm your host, Amanda Alford, and today my guest is Jake Miller. If you follow Twitter, you definitely know probably who Jake Miller is with his educational gifts. Jake is from Kent, Ohio. He is the host of the podcast Educational Duct Tape. He is a certified Google trainer, tech integration specialist, speaker, and what I would consider at this point kind of a Twitter celebrity. I mean, the educational gift guy, you definitely have the blue check mark on the educational gift guy.
Hey, I'm waiting for the real check mark. That'd be awesome if I had the real check mark.
Well, and my students asked me today, they're like, when are you getting the blue check mark? And I'm like, not for a long time. It's going to take a while to get the check mark. But you can follow Jake on Twitter with his handle at Jake Miller Tech, TECH. He also has a website, jakemiller.net, and you can subscribe to his newsletter, jakemiller.net/newsletter, where you can check out all of his gifts, all of his content. And then, of course, you can find his podcast, Educational Duct Tape, on iTunes and most podcasting apps, YouTube. I personally listen to it on iTunes just because that app is really handy. You just hit the app and it comes on. Thank you so much, Jake, for being on my show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And so I'm going to start off, since you are the GIF guy. Is it GIF or is it GIF? Like that seems to be, I know there was like a Twitter war going on, like Team GIF, Team GIF. Like, what would you say?
It's GIF. GIF just sounds weird.
I was like, GIF sounds like peanut butter. And I know you have the stickers where you can have the GIF, like the Christmas GIF, or GIF, which is the peanut butter. And I say GIF. And I know
I'm still nice to people who say GIF. I just tell them they're wrong first. And I'm nice to them.
Politely correct them. Is it kind of like the grammar police where you're like,
exactly.
That's not the correct way.
Right.
So
we can still be friends, but
you need to learn how to pronounce it correctly.
Right.
I love that. So real quick, let's do a shout out to your podcast, Educational Duct Tape. So if you want to, kind of tell everybody what it's about. I know you do in your podcast, you always give a brief rundown. So for those of you who haven't heard of it, if you could give us the brief 411 on your duct tape.
Yeah, so educational duct tape it's kind of a metaphor that I've been using and kind of honing for 6 or 7 years in various instances of speaking with teachers. And what it is the metaphor goes, I believe educational technology is at its most useful when it's used to solve a problem in the classroom or meet a goal or address a learning standard or help a teacher reach some pedagogical goal that they couldn't have reached otherwise, rather than the technology being the goal of the lesson. The exception, of course, is if you teach computer science or something like that, then the technology obviously is the goal. But otherwise, technology should be a tool, and duct tape's the same way, right? We don't start our day thinking like, today I'm going to use duct tape. You think I'm going to solve whatever problems I have. I'm going to make sure everything in my house is working or everything at my job is working. And sometimes duct tape is the tool that we use. So I think educational technology should be viewed the same way. And
I listen to your podcast. I love it. I'm always looking for, inspirational ways, new things, always learning, as a teacher, endlessly learning, like always trying to reach out and find new ways, because just like everything else, somebody's always thought of a more creative way or just a different way of doing it.
Right.
And I just enjoy listening to all the different ways and ideas of people's creativity. You also play a game on your Duct Tape podcast that I find humorous. I love you call it kind of like the newlywed game.
Right.
But it's for EdTech collaborators, and it's kind of the BFF game. Like, how well do you know your EdTech buddy?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to play it twice, and I do it whenever I have a guest back to back with somebody they collaborate with regularly. So the first time it happened was with Sean Fahey and Carly Mora, who have collaborated on an ebook for Flipgrid and for Wakelet, and now also for Twitter. And so they work together a lot, even though they live hundreds of miles apart. They collaborate online a lot. So in back-to-back episodes, they answered questions about each other. And the last few weeks have been Kim Polishuk and Jen Giffen, who have a podcast together. So it was fun kind of picking on them and having them guess things about each other. They knew each other kind of scary well, though.
And yeah, I was like, especially the, what do you watch on Netflix and the whole 80s band. And I agree with you. My favorite 80s band would be Bon Jovi. Like if if I had to choose, I even asked my students that this morning. I'm like, I know you guys weren't even close to the 80s, but if you had to choose, it would be Bon Jovi, right? Like kind of leading them into it. And they're like, oh yeah, Living on a Prayer. Yeah. I'm like, that's right, kids. Keeping that alive. So I've been waiting for you for this interview so I can kind of introduce kind of a similar game. We do whiteboard messages in my classroom. And for those of you who are listening who don't know what a whiteboard message is, it's just basically writing a question or inspirational message up on my whiteboard and having the students write their answers. What are their thoughts? Does it speak to them and whatnot? And I got this idea from a fifth grade teacher in Illinois. Her name is Brittany Root, and you can follow her on Instagram. Miss Fifth is her Instagram handle, and she's on maternity leave right now, but she, I do believe, has a full year's worth of whiteboard messages now, so over 180 whiteboard messages.
Oh, wow.
And it's really impressive. And another teacher and myself, we have started using these to build relationships with our students. Now, my co-collaborator who uses it, Amanda Cole, she was in the very first episode I did with Fears from a Teacher. Being the language arts teacher, she, of course, does more of the poems and like inspirational quotes. And myself kind of being like the goofy science teacher, asks the random questions like, tacos, soft shell or hard, just crazy little things like that. But my students love it. And so we have started asking the whiteboard messages on Instagram and on Facebook. My students this year are like, we need to get these questions out here. These are like authentic questions. And they're not. They're not really great questions. They are what 12-year-olds think are great, which is why I asked them. So I've got two questions for you.
Okay.
The first one is a huge debate in my class. Okay. And it has to do with Pop-Tarts. Should Pop-Tarts be eaten warm or cold?
I think the first part here is the question should Pop-Tarts be eaten? And I'm not sure that the answer is a no. I don't know if there's any real food in them, but I think if I've got to eat some Pop-Tarts, I'm definitely going to eat them warm, right? I'm going to get the s'mores ones and I'm going to eat them warm. How else would you eat a s'mores Pop-Tart? I don't know. I don't understand. When I see a person with them in the bag and they're just eating them cold, I'm like, what's wrong with you? What happened to you that made you this way?
I completely agree.
Yeah, I have a debate with friends of mine about which part of the Pop-Tart is better, the inside or like the crust part. Who likes the crust part? But some people actually prefer the crust part.
Amen. I am totally with you. If I had to choose one, it's the inside where all the filling is.
Right.
I mean,
and
you got that flavor for a reason.
Right.
My students.
And it's piping hot. You got to have like piping hot, like almost burn your mouth on the s'mores in there.
I completely agree. Completely. And I told my students today, I said, listen, I have a guest that I'm going to do a podcast with today, and I'm going to ask the Pop-Tart question. And it was like all of a sudden, the debate, whether or not. And I posted it on Instagram last week during our spring break, and we had over 300 votes on the Pop-Tarts, and 52% was warm. And I came back with that data, and my kids were like, no, like it.
How did 48% of people like their Pop-Tarts cold?
I don't know. So second question, and this is my question of the week on Instagram, and that is, if you and your family could go anywhere in the world for a 7-day vacation, where would you go?
I would love to visit, like two places I'd love to visit are England. I'd love to go to London, and I'd love to go to Australia. I don't know why Australia and why London. I would love to visit them, but really, if I'm getting away for 7 days, I'm going somewhere warm and there's going to be a beach and it's going to be super relaxing. So I'm going to Hawaii. I'm hoping somebody's paying for me, right? I don't have to pay.
Oh yeah, it's totally free. It's totally free.
Okay, we're going to Hawaii then.
Sounds good. Well, when I asked my students this, of course it was just them. And my first period class, you would think being first period, they'd kind of be asleep, and they're not. They're the ones that like debate everything. And they're like, well, who's going? How much does it cost? Is it free? What if my mom says no? And so I was like, guys, you are making really easy questions so much more difficult. But I love it because the relationship that it builds, like the information that I get, and I share information about myself and my family. And I love that because they'll come back, a couple of weeks later with something crazy that I asked off, my whiteboard messages, and they remember that. Like that's
Right.
building those connections.
Oh yeah. What is the quote? I'm paraphrasing it, but it's something like that. Your students won't care about your teaching until they know that you care about them, or something like that. But it's such a fun way to build that rapport and for them to feel you connecting with them as humans, not just as students, right?
Exactly. And letting them know that I'm real and genuine. Like I also make mistakes. I also, like Pop-Tarts, or I really don't like Pop-Tarts, but if I had to, I agree, I would eat them warm, because they were like, what's your favorite kind of Pop-Tart? And I'm like, none. Like they have no nutritional value. And when I said that, I realized how old I was getting when I'm like, Pop-Tarts are not nutritional at all. Do you know how much high corn syrup and fructose is in those? And I'm like, holy cow, I am old, because when I was 12, Pop-Tarts were awesome. Way too much thought. So switching over to kind of more serious, take us down the road of what your journey in education has been and kind of your why. What is your why in education?
Well, I started off as a math teacher. That was my goal when I came out of high school and got into college, was to be a math teacher. And the reason was I loved mathematics and I loved working with kids. I had younger cousins who I loved playing with. And I had a high school math teacher who asked me to do some tutoring during a free period when I was in high school. So I did some tutoring with 4th and 5th graders. And I really found that what I was doing there resonated with me, to help somebody who was struggling at something see their way to feeling more confident in it. And I thought at the time that it just meant I really like teaching students. And for years, I thought that's what it was. And I do like working with students. But during my time as an educator, so I was in the classroom, so to speak, for 12 years. And towards the end of those 12 years, I found out what I actually got the most enjoyment from, even though I enjoy working with students, is working with educators themselves and getting them more confident in trying new things in their classrooms. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because it's got that domino effect where I'm helping the teacher and I'm helping the students. But I really enjoy a teacher who's feeling intimidated by a process or by a technology tool, but is willing to accept my help, and I could lead them to feeling confident and doing things for their class. And you know how that works a lot of the time. They start to feel more confident, and then they're more confident in other things too. You might teach them how to use Google Slides, and they're like, hey, today I'm going to try out Google Drawings, just because now they're feeling more confident. So during those years, I've kind of shifted to that. And now I've been a technology coach for 4 years. And during those 4 years also, I've started to even try to branch out even further, because I want to help teachers I work with in my school, but I also want to, there's so many teachers out there. I want to help them all. So that's why I leverage the podcast and Twitter and my website to do that. And that really is my why, is to take somebody who lacks confidence in something and help them see their value in themselves, that they can do that, right? And feel confident in it.
So, and I think it was either your first or second podcast, maybe your first podcast, where you were just kind of introducing what educational duct tape was, and you were explaining like the bouncy house with your kids. And I totally get that. That is like a total parent understanding of, right. I spent all this money, 3 days later, you have no interest in it. And you're like, right. Really?
That bounce house.
But similar to you, I make a lot of videos for our teachers and send them out. And I know you were talking about that you got in the gifts because you were making all these instructional videos and you put this effort in and you edit, and it takes time to do all of this. And very few teachers were watching it. And I can tell you, I am in that boat right now. I completely feel where you're coming from, because teachers don't have a lot of time. We've spent so much time with the students, emails, trying to get all of this into our day. The last thing we have, even if it's a 5-minute video, is to watch one more 5-minute video or anything like that. And that by seeing that there's still a need, but changing the way that you pursue it, and that's how you made the animated GIFs.
Right.
30 seconds, 1 minute shows the exact same thing. And I know as myself, there's times that I go home and I don't want to hear anything else. Like I just want 5 to 10 minutes, but then to just sit there and watch it over and over again and know, all right, where did I mess up in a step? Mm-hmm. And I love that. I've tried a little bit with the GIFs, just a little bit with my students, but I haven't fully branched out to making everything a GIF because they're like, we still just want to hear you. We just want to hear you.
That's good too.
To talk. So,
I think part of the reason that I switched over to GIFs is I was discovering, and I, as you know, I kind of delved into it in that podcast episode, but I was discovering that when somebody watches a video, they need to either really value what they're watching or they really need to trust who they're watching it from, right? So your students are going to be likely to watch a YouTube video about, what am I drawing a blank on? About Fortnite. Right. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter who made the video. It's about Fortnite. They're interested in the topic. Right. Or they're going to be likely to watch a video that's from you, maybe because they trust you. Right. So you're either an audience they trust or a topic they're interested in. So when I was making videos on, say, Google Classroom, and the internet it's full of videos about Google Classroom and nobody knew me, I was neither a trusted audience nor had a topic where they were seeking out more information. There was already a saturation of information out there. So then I had to find a third thing, which was what if I'm not the trusted audience, and what if I'm not a topic that they're looking for? Then what I discovered was I had to engage them, right? I had to grab their attention to gain that trust from them. And now some of those people I do have that trust. So it could be videos now, I think, for a lot of people. And because now they know me and they know that I have good material, maybe they would tune in and watch those videos. But at the beginning, when I didn't have them as a trusted audience, I couldn't do that.
And just kind of as a side joke, I know that at least the people in Malaysia, they completely trust you.
They sure do.
Because you are like 2 GIFs away from being the new prime minister of Malaysia.
I think I might be.
Because I saw, was it Nick who posted that?
Yeah, I think so. From Pear Deck, yes.
Yes, and that you had so many retweets and so many likes. And that's fabulous that is being able to reach through a GIF, a language that they don't understand you don't understand them. But just like our students,
right?
Just like our students, we may not be speaking the same language, but they still got the point across and it spread like wildfire. Right. And that's why I was like, that is amazing.
Yeah, it's been fascinating because I'll look at all these comments on my GIF that's out there and I don't know what the comments say because they're another language. And it's so ironic because the GIF is about translating from one language to another language. So here I'm an English speaking person making an English speaking GIF about translating languages. And then people speaking languages that I'm not even sure what they are tweeting in their other language. And I'm like, what are you saying? So I have to translate it back to know what they're saying to me. But it's been a crazy experience over these last few weeks. I made the GIF almost a year ago now. And I've shared it on Twitter periodically throughout that time. And it always receives a good reaction. But it's interesting how it's just got the right person has to see it, right? And apparently the right person over there saw it because now everybody over there has seen it. And it's like you said, all over Malaysia, they're watching it.
Malaysia is the right person. Like if you can get one person in the country of Malaysia, it will spread. No, I love that. I saw that we were in Memphis for spring break and I saw that in the hotel room. I'm like, that's awesome. Like, know that many people are loving it and being educated over something like a GIF, something easy, small, but something that can be related to any language because it's visual. Question 2, what would you say are some common fears in education and how have you personally faced any of these fears?
I think the biggest fear in education is risk taking, right? And it's risk taking in a lot of different ways. What I deal with mostly as a technology coach is risk taking in trying new technologies because educators in particular are often nervous for one or many of a few reasons to try those new things in the classroom. And one is the what if it doesn't work reason, which I feel like I know that happens. And I know that's scary. And I know we feel like those 180 days or however many days we have for the students are so precious and we can't possibly lose one with a lesson that flops. But I think the gains are so high if that lesson works, trying out, let's say, Pear Deck, which we just mentioned, or whatever it might be. And then if it doesn't work, your students see you as that risk taker, and they see you, picking yourself back up and trying again. And they see you being an improvement minded, a growth mindseted individual, saying, well, we're going to try something new today. We'll see how it works. And then when it doesn't work, say, oh guys, I'm sorry, this didn't go the way I expected. Here's what we're going to do instead. And they see how you react in an adverse situation. So I think that kind of risk taking is okay. We also see it with our students in education, where we ask them to do something that's outside of their normal, the game of school, or just outside of their comfort zone. And I see it a lot from very capable students, where they're used to receive content, study, take a test. If it's something different where they may have to create, then they get a little bit nervous because maybe it's something they've never done before. And what if it doesn't work out? And that's where the greatest growth happens, is when we try those new things out, especially if we are feeling nervous about them. But it can be hard. And I see it in my day to day as an educator and as a leader, and as a coach and as a podcaster. When I go to a teacher in my building to try to have a coaching discussion with them about maybe trying a new technology tool in the classroom. So maybe I go to a teacher and I know they're stressed out. I know they're overwhelmed. I know they're worried because testing season's coming right around the corner. And here I come walking through the door to ask them if they want to try out Flipgrid or something. And I know there's possibility that I'm going to get not a positive reaction back from them. So I have fear as I'm approaching them. They have fear of like, oh gosh, what's he going to ask me to do? And then they have fear of, what if it doesn't work? What if I lose today? What if my students are poorly behaved? What if they don't learn the content and it doesn't go well in the test? Things like that. But then I also feel it with the podcast or with Twitter. When I make a GIF like that one that I made about Google Translate, what if I put it out there and people say, well, no, this isn't the best way to do this. Or, well, your GIF moved too fast. I really couldn't see it. Or it's funny because people look at that one and they see me translate the word welcome to Spanish, and it translates incorrectly to, I try to translate you are welcome, and it translates to bienvenido, which is just welcome. And so when I make these things, I'm like, what if it doesn't work? But you'll never know until you put it out there. And that's the hard thing about fears, is the only way to know if it's going to work is to try it. And sometimes it doesn't, but the growth happens when you try it.
And I love that, because that's really being a role model for our students, because
Right.
Our students are always, well, I don't know. Mm-hmm. Kind of what you were talking about. If the students are just used to read, content, worksheet, test, that's every day what they do. And you say, hey, we're going to do a Flipgrid today. And they're like, well, what if it doesn't work? Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important, like you were saying, to role model that and just say, go for it. See what happens. And that reminds me of a meme that I've seen that says, I'm just a teacher standing in front of my whiteboard praying for the internet to not go out.
Yeah.
Because you put this fabulous lesson together, like Pear Deck, mm-hmm. and the internet goes out. What do you do? Mm-hmm. And your students are watching. Your students are always watching. How do you react? And if you can see everything, like you said, as a growth mindset and as a learning opportunity, they're more willing to take that risk as well, instead of just, well, I'm going to fail or I'm not good, letting them kind of see your behavior and being that positive role model. Because if the teacher doesn't have a growth mindset, the students are going to pick up on that and they're going to imitate what they see.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So last question, what advice can you share to teachers who kind of are having the fears that you were talking about? So you said that, you go to some of your educators when you're coming up with a new technology or anything like that. What advice can you share to those who are facing those fears?
Well, I think that the best advice that a teacher can hear is that any forward motion you're making in your craft of teaching is good enough, right? You shouldn't fear that you're not doing as well as the person in the room next to you, because if you're continuing to move forward, you're doing a good thing for your students, right? But then the other thing to understand is that the risk taking is and should be welcomed, and failing when you take those risks is and should be okay, right? Because they're opportunities for growth. They're both opportunities for you to grow when those things happen. They're opportunities for your students to see you doing that, and they're opportunities for your peers to see you doing that. So if you want your school to have a culture of risk taking, if you want your students to feel comfortable doing a passion project of some sort, well, they've got to see teachers who are comfortable doing those kinds of things. And if you want the teacher down the hall to feel comfortable trying a new technology, well, they've got to see you feeling comfortable trying one and having it fall flat on its face, and seeing you, like I said earlier, get back up and try again, because that is the best thing you could do. And to me, that's why that's the best way to deal with that fear, is to say, you know what, it might not work out, and that is okay. And I in a recent episode talked about a reflection sentence starter that came from Jen Sincero in her book, and it said she started sentences with "this is good because," and she started talking about using that in situations where things don't go well. So she talks about getting a flat tire with her kids in the car, running late to swim practice or something like that, and thinking to yourself, this is good because, and her example was, my kids see how I deal with an adverse situation. So even in these quote unquote failures, what is the good side? And normally there is one, and so that's a good way to look at your fears, is even that is a growth opportunity.
And I really love that, because as educators, you would think educators are probably some of the most fearless individuals, because we are willingly saying, yes, I am going to go into a classroom for 180 days with 25 students in elementary or 100 plus students in secondary, and say, I'm willingly going to not only be with these students, but engage them and educate them for 180 days. You would think teachers would have no fear, because right. I don't know how many times I've heard somebody go, oh, you teach middle school, bless you. Like they're like, that must be a really scary thing. And I'm thinking, no, it's not. Like, as a teacher, I feel most comfortable in my classroom with my students, doing what I do on an everyday occasion. But like you were saying, you introduce Flipgrid, which is awesome, by the way. I love using Flipgrid. Quick to learn, quick to use, very easy. And some of the teachers are like, whoa, let's back off now. Let's not get crazy.
Right.
And so I love that, letting your students see this is good because. And like I said, I know you spoke about that in your episode that just came out in your podcast.
Right. The thing about the teachers and that fear is that I think we all dealt with that fear when we started our job, right? So we had that initial fear of standing up in front of a classroom of students, and then we did it a couple of times and it went okay. And now that fear is gone, and that has now become our comfort zone. So the new fear is stepping out of that new comfort zone, right? It's just like, say, driving a car. When we first learned how to drive a car, we were all scared to get behind the wheel that very first time. But now that we have been doing it, we're completely comfortable getting in the car. But if you told me that I'm going to go to England and I'm going to drive on the left side of the car, on the left side of the road, and it's going to be a stick shift, I'm going to be afraid now, because that's now outside of my comfort zone. Even though it's, parallel to something I've already done, it's different. So it's outside of my comfort zone.
It's just enough difference to make you uncomfortable. But I think a lot of times it's still intriguing. And I think a lot of times teachers are intrigued by what you're doing.
Right.
And they kind of fall back to, well, let me see how it works for you. Let me see you do it. And I think that's why the GIFs and the instruction videos and such, for them to fall back onto, all right, this is where, kind of like a math problem, this is where I messed up. Here's the next couple of steps to get me back on track.
Right.
Well, thank you, Jake, so much for joining me today. And thank you all for listening to the Facing Your Fears podcast. If you like my show and want to know more, you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is @Alford_Science. You can find all of my podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and Google Play. Be sure to leave me a review and make sure you subscribe. Join me next Sunday for the newest episode of the Facing Your Fears podcast. And as the great Red Green used to say, I'm pulling for you. We're all in this together. See you next week.